It was just a movie set until something moved on its own. The camera rolled, but something else called action first. She looked into the mirror and saw something looking back. Not every crew member was listed in the credits. They came to shoot a horror film, but something else was already watching. You thought it was just a movie until it followed you home. Midnight marks the end of filming or the beginning of something worse. Subscribe before it finds you first. Some films are haunted by their story, but what if the haunting seeps beyond the script and into real life? In the shadowy world of horror cinema, few franchises hold as much weight or fear as the Conjuring universe. Each installment explores chilling real-life cases of demonic possession and paranormal events, but the latest chapter, The Conjuring: Last Rites, may have gone one step further, blurring the line between fiction and frightening reality. From the moment production began, a strange energy surrounded the project. Veteran crew members, many of whom had worked on previous horror sets, described a heavy feeling that hung in the air, especially during late-night shoots. It wasn't the typical pressure of tight deadlines or creative stress. This was different. Reports began to surface quietly at first. A camera assistant mentioned that their gear would reset itself repeatedly, always at 3:07 a.m., a time associated with witching hour legends. A lighting technician claimed that fully secured rigs would tilt on their own, with no wind, no movement, no explanation. At first, people brushed it off. Tired minds see strange things, right? But then, the incidents grew bolder. One evening, while shooting a pivotal exorcism scene, multiple crew members stopped cold when a chilling scream echoed across the soundstage. A scream not scripted, not performed, and not caught on any boom mic. Playback captured nothing but silence. Props moved between takes when no one was in the room. Doors slammed in locked locations. A production assistant fainted after claiming she saw a figure dressed in black watching her from the shadows, only for others to later admit they'd seen something similar, but had been too scared to speak up. Even the cast wasn't immune. Several actors allegedly suffered from intense nightmares, waking up in cold sweats, some refusing to sleep alone in their hotel rooms. One of them reportedly requested a spiritual cleansing, not as part of the role, but for real. It wasn't long before whispers began circulating, what if this set is cursed? Was it all in their heads, a byproduct of living inside a horror story for months on end? Or was something truly attached to the project, something that didn't want the story told? As more and more incidents piled up, one thing became clear. This wasn't a typical production, plagued by delays or logistics. This was something far more unsettling. The fear wasn't just on the screen. It was creeping into real life, into the minds and lives of those working behind the scenes. So what really happened on the set of The Conjuring: Last Rites? To understand the truth, we have to dig deeper into the actual events, the day-to-day horrors that turned a horror movie into a personal nightmare for the people who made it. Let's take a closer look at the strange events that unfolded and how they sparked one of the most talked about real-life hauntings in horror film history. What began as whispers of unease soon spiraled into something far more disturbing. The early days of production were peppered with odd, explainable mishaps. A light going out here, a misplaced prop there. But soon these minor glitches became unnerving patterns that no one could laugh off. It started with objects shifting without warning. A camera dolly, left locked and secured, was found in a different position the next morning. Crucial equipment moved during scenes, ruining takes, even though no one had touched it. A rosary used as a prop vanished from its storage box, only to reappear on set hours later, hanging from a light rig 15 feet above the ground. No one admitted to moving it. No one even knew how it got there. Then came the whispers. Crew members started hearing faint voices when no one else was around. It wasn't just a creak or wind. It was clear speech. Breathy, low, unintelligible words that seemed to echo just behind them. One sound technician, after hours of playback, reported faint vocal sounds captured on a boom mic even when the actors weren't speaking. Sometimes the voice called a name, sometimes it just breathed. Security footage reviewed after one particularly eerie night showed nothing out of the ordinary, until someone noticed a frame-by-frame glitch in the corner of the screen. A flicker of what looked like a figure standing in the shadows of the soundstage. The footage skipped. The figure was gone. Several crew members began reporting apparitions. These weren't fleeting shadows or tricks of the light. They were specific, defined. A woman in black, always seen from the side. A child in a hospital gown, spotted near the makeup trailer. A faceless figure lingering in reflective surfaces. A production assistant quit on the spot after claiming he saw a dark figure watching him from behind a wardrobe rack. A figure that was still there when he turned around, only to vanish the moment someone else entered the room. People began arriving late, leaving early. Some brought religious charms, others asked to be reassigned to daytime work only. A quiet dread settled over the crew, especially during shoots after sunset. When the cast filmed a particularly intense possession scene, the entire set reportedly went dark for 23 seconds. All lights, all monitors dead, before rebooting on their own. The generator logs showed no failure. The outage was unexplainable. The incidents weren't isolated, they weren't ignorable, and most disturbingly, they weren't always happening during filming. They followed people home. That's when the fear deepened. The question was no longer whether the film was haunted. The question became something else entirely, was something from the story. Waking up, as fear rippled through the team, it began to affect them in more intimate, terrifying ways. Not just in what they saw, but in what they felt. Because for many, the haunting didn't end when they left the set. It began to follow them into their sleep, their homes and their minds. And that's where the true horror began to take hold. The experiences weren't confined to the set. As filming progressed, cast and crew alike began reporting something far more personal and far more disturbing. It started with the dreams. Multiple crew members confided in one another that they were experiencing intense, vivid nightmares, not the usual stress-induced dreams that come with tight schedules and long shoots. These were something else. Recurring images of being chased, held down, or watched by shadowy figures they couldn't escape. Some described waking up in the middle of the night unable to move, as if something was sitting on their chest. A few refused to sleep alone, checking into hotel rooms with double beds just so someone else could be nearby. There was an unspoken fear of being isolated, even for a moment. The emotional weight of the production began to show in their faces. People who were once energetic and composed became quiet, withdrawn. One assistant director reportedly broke down in the middle of a scene rehearsal, claiming she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was behind her, whispering in her ear, even when no one was there. Others began experiencing waves of dread that came out of nowhere. One makeup artist described it as like walking into a funeral you didn't know was happening. Word spread quickly. Not just among the team, but within horror circles and fan forums. The term curse surfaced again, but now with more force. People began to question whether the very story being told had somehow crossed a line. After all, The Conjuring, Last Rites, was reportedly based on one of the darkest, most spiritually charged cases ever investigated by the Warrens. A case involving rituals, sacrificial symbols, and something that was never supposed to be documented in full. Some speculated that recreating the events with disturbing accuracy may have invited something in. Others theorized that the energy on set, amplified by fear and belief, was creating a kind of magnet for the paranormal. The cast had been warned not to mock the story or the spirits during filming, a note that, at the time, had been passed off as a joke. But now, in hindsight, it didn't seem so funny. Even skeptics began to tread carefully. One producer, known for being level-headed and rational, reportedly insisted that the final shooting days be performed only after a local priest blessed the space. Officially, it wasn't acknowledged. Unofficially, everyone was relieved. The rumors took on a life of their own, growing darker, more detailed, and more difficult to dismiss. They weren't just stories now, they were shared experiences, whispered behind trailers, confessed between takes, and cautiously passed on to outsiders like warnings. Still, one question remained unanswered. Was all of this simply the result of exhaustion, fear, and overexposure to a dark subject? Or was something truly at work behind the scenes, feeding off the energy of the film itself? Because for many, what came next was even worse. Not the unexplained events or the whispers in the dark, but the lasting scars they carried with them after the cameras stopped rolling. As the days dragged on and production neared its end, the sense of unease didn't fade, it deepened. By now, the cast and crew weren't just witnessing strange events or hearing whispers, they were carrying something heavier, something that lingered long after they left the set each day. Several crew members, when asked about their experience months later, hesitated before answering. Some declined to speak at all. But among those who did, a chilling pattern emerged. Stories of deep emotional disturbance, psychological strain, and an overwhelming sense that they had been changed by something they couldn't explain. One key grip admitted in an off-the-record conversation that he developed panic attacks during night shoots, something he had never experienced in 2 decades of working on horror films. He described feeling watched constantly, as if something was just out of view, no matter where he stood. Even after the film wrapped, the anxiety didn't stop. He took a leave of absence from work and later confided that he had begun attending therapy just to process what had happened. An actress whose character endures a possession in the film reportedly experienced night terrors so vivid she could no longer sleep alone. She later shared that the boundary between her role and her real life began to blur during the final weeks of shooting. "I felt like I was still being haunted by the character," she told a friend, "like something came through me and stayed." There were also whispers that a supporting actor refused to return to the set after a particularly disturbing sequence. According to an anonymous crew member, he had walked off mid-scene, pale and shaken, saying only, "Something's wrong, I'm not safe here." He completed his work off-set in ADR, never stepping foot back into the filming location again. For others, the aftermath came more quietly, but just as intensely. One post-production editor claimed he began hearing faint knocking in his apartment, always at the same time, around 3:07 a.m., while he was reviewing footage. Another crew member began having vivid dreams of fire, rituals, and unfamiliar voices calling his name. He reportedly started sleeping with the lights on, even weeks after the film had wrapped. No official statements were made, of course. The studio downplayed the stories. But within the circle of those who were there, something had clearly happened. Some called it trauma, others called it suggestion or mass hysteria. But there were a few who believed it was something else entirely. A price paid for tapping into something too dark, too real, and too close to the truth. Whatever it was, it left a mark, not just in stories or rumors, but in the haunted eyes of those who lived through it. And while skeptics would try to rationalize what happened, others began to wonder, was this all just psychological? Or had the production itself become the stage for something far more sinister, something that refused to stay on the page? Not everyone was convinced. For every eerie story whispered in hushed tones behind the scenes, there were others, producers, journalists, skeptical crew members, who urged a more grounded explanation, not because they wanted to discredit the accounts, but because they believed something far more human might be at play. The truth is, fear is contagious, especially in environments already steeped in darkness. Horror sets are unlike any other. They demand emotional vulnerability, long hours in dim lighting, scenes of screaming, weeping, conjuring demons, and surrendering to fear again and again. Add to that the nature of The Conjuring, Last Rites, a film drawn from one of the Warren files' most spiritually aggressive cases, and you have a perfect storm. Psychologists have long studied something called suggestibility, the human mind's ability to believe and embody an idea once it has been introduced, especially in moments of stress or fatigue. When one person hears whispers, others start listening for them. When one person dreams of a figure in the dark, others may start to see it too. It's not dishonesty, it's psychological priming, the brain reacting to emotional cues, even unconsciously. And then there's sleep deprivation. Nearly every film set runs long hours, but horror productions are notorious for their brutal overnight schedules. Exhaustion dulls logic and heightens emotion. A shadow in the corner becomes a figure. A creak in the wood becomes a whisper. Many actors, fully immersed in method acting, push themselves to emotional extremes, losing sleep, skipping meals, living partially in character for weeks. It's not hard to see how boundaries between real and imagined might blur under that weight. The media too plays its part. Horror fans love the idea of cursed productions. It's part of the mythos, a tradition carried from The Exorcist to Poltergeist to The Omen. Behind-the-scenes hauntings feed into the story's legacy, boosting intrigue and ticket sales. So when rumors started swirling around Last Rites, entertainment blogs and horror forums ran with them. A single comment taken out of context became a headline. A vague anecdote became evidence. Still, some on set remained unconvinced by these rational explanations. They argued that while stress and imagination can explain one or two incidents, they don't explain everything. They don't explain why multiple people on separate days described seeing the same apparition, or how a locked camera angle changed mid-take without being touched, or why certain crew members experienced the exact same nightmare, the same setting, the same presence, without ever having discussed it beforehand. In the end, the production of The Conjuring, Last Rites became a battleground between belief and skepticism. Between those who sought reason and those who claimed reason was no longer enough. Between those who needed the story to be fiction and those who feared it might not be. Maybe the real power of the curse wasn't in levitating objects or ghostly voices. Maybe it was in how deeply the story got under people's skin and refused to let go. As The Conjuring, Last Rites finally made its way into theaters, the rumors and strange stories that had swirled around the production for months didn't fade. If anything, they intensified. Now that the film was out in the open, the question began to shift. Was all of this a clever marketing strategy? Horror films have long been known to blur the line between reality and fiction, especially when it comes to unsettling rumors and viral marketing. The idea of a haunted production is an alluring story, a tale of cursed sets and troubled cast members that only fuels the intrigue. In fact, many classic horror films, from The Blair Witch Project to Paranormal Activity, were marketed in ways that suggested the events on screen were inspired by true occurrences. Could The Conjuring, Last Rites have used these same tactics, amplifying rumors of supernatural events on set to create a buzz? It's possible, even likely, that the studio leaned into the rumors. After all, fear sells. The more unsettling the behind-the-scenes story, the more curious the audience becomes about the film. But what makes Last Rites different is how the stories didn't feel manufactured. They felt too real. The eerie accounts of objects moving on their own, unexplained noises, and crew members experiencing nightmares weren't neatly tied up into a promotional campaign. These stories were raw, unsettling, and shared by multiple people who had no incentive to keep the mystery alive once the film was released. If this was all part of a viral marketing scheme, it was far messier, far more chaotic, and far more genuine than anyone could have planned. Then, there's the weight of the Conjuring curse, the eerie lore that has surrounded the franchise since its inception. The films are based on the real-life cases investigated by Ed and Lorraine Warren, and with each new movie, it seems like the dark energy from these cases follows the production team. Stories of cursed sets, haunted props, and actors haunted by the very things they portray on screen have become a well-known part of the Conjuring legacy. The last Rites installment didn't just contribute to this curse, it deepened it. The connection between the film's content, rooted in real-world paranormal investigations, and the strange occurrences on set felt almost inevitable. Could it be that Last Rites wasn't just another horror film, but one that tapped into something darker, that the very energy of the case it was based on somehow affected the crew? Whether it was the real-life tragedy that inspired the story or the power of suggestion, the film was steeped in a kind of unease that seemed to follow everyone involved, well before the first scene was even shot. But what's truly haunting is whether the fear felt by the cast and crew, and even the audience, is real or just a product of the experience. Horror movies at their core play on primal fears and suggestions, the eerie tension, the dimly lit rooms, the unsettling music, all designed to manipulate our senses and create an emotional response. But when a film is built on the foundation of real-life paranormal occurrences, when the actors and crew begin to report their own haunting experiences, it can become hard to distinguish what's fiction and what's genuine fear. Was the fear part of the experience? Was it something that the mind manufactured after weeks of tension and fatigue? Or was there truly something unexplainable at play? Could it be that the very act of making a film about the supernatural opens a door to something darker, more malevolent, and beyond our control? In the end, the answer may not matter. Whether the curse was real or fabricated, whether it was a marketing gimmick or a true supernatural event, the impact it had on the people involved is undeniable. For those who lived through it, the memories of that haunting production will linger long after the credits roll. Because sometimes, the scariest thing about a horror movie isn't what happens on screen. It is the lingering question of whether the terror is truly confined to the story or if it follows you home. In the end, the question of whether The Conjuring Last Rites was truly cursed may never be answered. Was it all part of a carefully crafted viral marketing strategy designed to blur the lines between reality and fiction? Or did something far more sinister seep into the production, influencing the cast and crew in ways that no one could have predicted? The accounts of strange occurrences, objects moving on their own, whispers in the dark, and inexplicable apparitions remain shrouded in mystery. Some may be attributed to the power of suggestion, the long hours on set, and the emotional strain of portraying the supernatural. Others are harder to explain away. There's no denying the impact this film had, not just on its audience, but on the people who lived through its making. Whether it was the physical manifestations of fear or the psychological toll it took on those involved, Last Rites became something far more than a simple horror film. It became an experience. For some, a haunting that followed them long after they left the set. And perhaps that's the most chilling part of all. Because whether cursed or not, one thing's certain, this film left a mark far beyond the screen. The stories, the fear, the unsettling memories of those who were there will linger in the minds of those who dare to uncover the truth. The line between fiction and reality may have blurred during production, but the consequences of that fear are real, lasting, and impossible to forget. So, the next time you watch The Conjuring Last Rites, remember, it's not just the ghosts that haunt this film. It's the unsettling question of whether the terror is truly confined to the story, or if it's something that might follow you home.